Hey, good afternoon, folks. It's Coach Blue for you. It's raining today, so I thought I'd do a video with the rain in the background, see how interesting that is. But today's topic's um, one that's very overrated in my mind, very small mind, and that's communication. So, we're going to talk about communication today and a couple different things related to communication, and we'll touch upon them as we go down the list. But communication, I think communication's overrated. People put a lot of emphasis on communicating effectively. Having communication is the baseline or the foundation for relationships and to how people can get along and do things. And honestly, I think it's bullshit. And I'll kind of explain that to you. Um, I actually think communication's a curse. The ability for a human being, for mankind, to be able to communicate verbally is a curse. Uh, The reason I think it's a curse is because most of the time we really don't communicate. We talk at each other. We talk through people. We talk at people. We're not understanding. We're just want to get our point across. It's a battle. It's a verbal battle. Look at everything else that God, Allah, Buddha, whoever you believe in created. No other species can talk. We're the only species that can physically talk. Every other animal or every other species, they communicate, but either through some type of telepathical pathway, through something nonverbal, through some type of noise, through some type of vibration. They communicate, but it's not verbally. Um, and they don't argue, they don't contest and fight based off verbal confrontations of trying to prove something or verbal fights. Their fights are about territory, food, uh, domain, life preservation. They're not having verbal battles with each other about what you ate, what you didn't eat, how much money you spent, where you went, where you supposed to go, why you didn't call me, why you didn't text me, why you took too long to do this. They're not having those type of confrontations, which we call communication. So if the all these animals or species can communicate effectively without verbal words, and we have this ability and we don't use it right, it's a curse. It's not a blessing. It's not the the avenue or the option that's it's supposedly what sets us apart. I don't believe it really does. I think it actually sets us behind. So I think it's overrated. But being that it is the ability that we were given is to communicate verbally, it's the lesser of two evils. I have no choice. Well, let me back up. I do have a choice. I could grunt all day. I could just be silent. I could write things down. I could do sign language. There are other ways I could communicate. But being that it's the lesser of a few evils, being that I have verbal communication, I'll touch upon that. So to start off with, like I said, I think it's overrated, and I do think it's a curse as opposed to a blessing because of how it's often used on a daily basis, which is it's often used as a weapon. People use it to attack, destroy, demoralize, demean, to tear apart other folks. Very rarely is it used to build somebody up, to uplift them, to help support them, to help get them to another level. It's all focused on destroy or proving who I am, or you want to be the center point. You want to be the king or the queen, or you want the focus. So often it's used as a weapon, and I don't think that God or our Creator gave it to us for it to be a weapon or for it to be such a curse. I believe his desire or will was that we would use it a lot better than what we do. We just have failed in that. And then there's other types of communication. We have verbal, which I'm talking about. We have nonverbal. Well, nonverbal communication is actually often stronger than verbal communication. Um, People who study human behavior, lie detectors, people who study personal behavior, personal reactions when they're interviewing folks of the nonverbal communication that's often sent off in reference to the verbal communication. Because a lot of times you can say something verbally, but your nonverbal communication sends a totally different message. So a lot of people are actually evaluating the nonverbal feedback that you're giving, and very little to the verbal feedback that you're getting. So someone could act like they're engaged and talking to you. So, for example, men and women, men and women are always talking about, guys want to pick up women or women want to be interested in a guy or whatever. But the body language says a lot. If two people are talking face to face and you're square, what I mean by that, shoulders facing each other and your bodies are facing each other, that means the person is open, especially if their hands are out, the legs maybe not be crossed, but they're facing you. That means they're inviting you for conversation. They're engaged. You get someone who's having a conversation with you and they're turned to the side, their legs are crossed, and all you get from them is this side and maybe a head because they have to turn their head to talk to you. They're really not engaged. They're really trying to push you away. They're really wishing you would just go the hell away so they can go to do something else or mind their own business. So those was the subtle parts about body language or nonverbal communication that sends different messages differently than what we're communicating through our mouth. Um, the biggest challenge we have with communicating is we don't listen. So when two people are talking, and I'm talking to you and you're talking to me, and let me write one point down that I don't want to forget. I think it's kind of important. All right. When two people are talking in a conversation, the person that's talking is obviously trying to get their message or get their point of view across or communicate whatever they're trying to communicate to the other person that's listening, or excuse me, on the other side. Well, the other person on the other side, they should be listening. They should be engaging or enveloping the information that's being passed on to them verbally by the person that's speaking to them. So what they should be thinking in their head, or what should be going on in their head, is they're hearing what that person's saying, they're hearing their message, they're formulating feedback and ideas based off what they're hearing. But that's not how it goes. This is what we do. While someone's talking to you, you're going, man, I wish this motherfucker would shut up. As soon as he takes a breath, I'm going to jump in and say my point of view. You're really not hearing anything. You're just waiting for that person to breathe, to have a 15 nanosecond breathe so you can jump in and say what you want to say and take your ramble or take your soapbox until you get to the point where you breathe and they jump back in. And now you two go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, just jumping in, trying to, it's like tag team wrestling. You tag and they run. They tag, you run. And at the end of the day, no one knows what you talked about. It's either an argument, a confrontation, a misunderstanding. It's nothing there because everyone is too busy while the other person's talking in their head, worrying about their rebuttal, what they want to say. So they've missed everything that the other person has said. They've missed words, they've missed paragraphs, they've missed the intent, they've missed the meaning of what that person was truly trying to communicate because they were so focused on, I want to say what I want to say, and I can't wait till they shut up so I can have my part. That's not listening. That's not communication. That's just words. It's a word battle. It's bullshit. And that's what 90% of the time that people do when they're talking. They're talking at each other. They're not talking with each other. They're talking at each other. They're talking over each other. They're just waiting for a time and opportunity to get their point in and their point across so that they can prove their point, whatever they want to do, so they can have their agenda. So based on that's what 90% of the people do. Like I said, it's not communication. That's bullshit. And we've put so much energy on communication's the root. It's the key. It's the source. It's the foundation. It's the base. But if 90% of the people aren't communicating effectively and they're not even listening to what the other person's saying, really, it's all hype. It's overrated. So if you want to improve your communication, if it's really that important to you, and if you really want to make it better for your relationship or your situation, then you really should practice listening skills. I'm not going to go into that today. I'll do a video on that maybe in the future, if so desire. But you can read about listening skills, different things you can practice or you can hone in on listening. And then you can also learn to read people's body languages, their nonverbal communication in addition to the words they're saying. And at that point, you begin to study people. You begin to evaluate the information that's coming out of their mouth, the signals that their bodies are sending you. So you're getting a total message. You're getting a total signal of what's going on. So you can actually give feedback that's relevant to the message they're trying to convey to you. And it can be a constructive conversation. The other part is, though, when you're doing that and you give information back, the other party's got to be willing to do the same thing. So another key part about communication and this verbal, nonverbal passing back and forth is there can't be any judgment. So you have to listen and you can't pass judgment. You cannot judge what just came out that person's mouth. You cannot condemn what they're saying to you. Because once you do that, your mind is closed. You've shut off. You've totally shut off from what to being able to hear or be receptive to what's coming out of their mouth because you've already judged it. You've already got some prejudice behind it. So you're not listening and you're prejudging them. So you're just destined to have a terrible conversation or a communication event. So listening and nonverbal, listening, no judging and no prejudice. We cross that off. We talked about this that most in conversations, most of the time becomes a battle. You're just trying to prove your point or prove who you are. That's all you care about is proving your perspective to the other person. It's a battle. Communication shouldn't be a battle. What's really important is like the what's your purpose in communication? I guess that's what you need to evaluate. Why are you communicating? What are you trying to do? What is the purpose or the meaning behind it? Is it to get an understanding of a matter for some people to communicate to come up with a solution? Is it to come up with a point of view to educate or to share some information with someone who doesn't have it and you want to be able to share that? What's the purpose behind it? And maybe once you establish the purpose of your communication, it will change the focus of how you approach it. Maybe you'll listen more. Maybe you won't judge or prejudge. Maybe you'll be more open. Maybe it won't be an attack or a battle. Obviously, if you're in a fight or an argument, that's all it is. It's not a communication. It's a battle. But I'm sure most people, when they start off, they're not looking for it to be a battle or a fight or an argument. They wanted it to be just some type of communication. There was some judgment passed or some prejudice passed in that. Then it turned into some not listening, and then it just elevated and grew from there. And now you've got an all-out shouting match, and there's no value to it. It's not communication. So we talked about purpose. Two other parts that I think are important is the person that is talking, you have a responsibility. A lot of people say, well, if they don't understand what I'm saying, fuck them. It doesn't really matter. That's their fault. They missed it. Wrong. You, as the communicator, as a person conveying the message, it's your responsibility to ensure that the person receiving the message understands you. So if you need to pick a different language, a different format, a different manner, a different approach, a different anything to help them understand what you're trying to communicate, that's your job. It's not your job just to put it out there and hope they'll get it. Here's a quick analogy. For those of you who have raised children, from infancy, often children start off with formula. There are children out there who can't take all types of formula, i.e. there are children who are lactose intolerant, example. So a child who's lactose intolerant, and you're feeding him, you don't know that at first, but you feed him formula that has a milk basin or lactose base, and they regurgitate or throw it up, or it doesn't settle well with them. You can't get mad at the child and say, well, damn, you should have ate this. Are you hungry? You need to take this formula. Don't spit that shit back up. Take this. I mean, you need to deal with it. No, what you do is you go and find a formula that can accommodate them. You find something that's lactose intolerant, that's a soy based or almond based. You change your message. You change how you supply them. The person talking is the supplier. Person listening is the receiver. So in the baby, in the formula, in the parent scenario, the parent is the supplier and the baby is the receiver. So if you're trying to feed the child, it's your responsibility as a parent to find the right food source or the adequate source to feed that child. It's not their fault they're lactose intolerant. It's not their fault that they're having a problem digesting what you're giving them. It's your responsibility. Often, two times in communication, we want to shun it off. It's like, too bad they didn't understand me. Fuck it. They didn't get it. Too bad. You're a poor communicator. It's bad. That's not how it works. You wouldn't do that to your child. For those of you actually who have children now, you probably didn't do it because they're still around. So think of it in that way. The communicator has a responsibility for ensuring or doing the best they can to help the person receiving understand their message or understand what they're trying to communicate to them, and have the patience to go through that in those scenarios to help them get to that point. But the receiver has a responsibility too, and that's you need to be open to how they're trying to help you understand, and not take it as a judgment of they're talking down to me, they're trying to belittle me. They may have to put it in a very simple form or in a very different type of format to help you understand it, and you shouldn't take that as a negative. It's that judgment thing again. Judgment kills a lot of shit. And the conversation is probably like one of the number one killers outside of just not listening. So we talked about responsibility. And the last one, I always talk about this at the end of my videos. It says, most of all, please gain understanding. Um, Understanding is just not hearing what someone saying. Say, yeah, I understand. I know what you're talking about. Understanding is super deep. My belief, for whatever it's worth, I believe if people talking to each other across the world, if we had a true understanding of what the other person was communicating to us, we wouldn't have any arguments. We couldn't fight. There'd be no fighting. Because if you had a true understanding of their message, there's nothing for you to get mad or defensive or offensive about. You have an understanding of what they're trying to communicate, and they have an understanding of what you're trying to share with them. So it's just a mutual exchange of information, not judge, no prejudice, received openly, and given back openly. We don't do that. So there's so many levels of dimension to communication. We're so one-dimensional. I think we're even less than one-dimensional as a human race in how we communicate. That's why it's such a failure. Um, but understanding to me is important. Do I have true understanding? No. Do I try to understand? Yeah, I ask a lot of questions. I want to find out why that person thinks the way they think and what's driving them to the point of where they're at to have the belief or point of view they have that you're trying to communicate. So questions to me are important in that aspect. Not just to question, not to question to throw somebody up, not to question to be an ass, but but questioning to trying to gain an understanding of their perspective or where they're coming from or what's behind the message they're trying to get to you. So it's Coach Blue one more time on communication. So you kind of heard, not kind of, you've heard my perspective. Uh, Please hit the like button. Please hit subscribe. Please tell your family, friends, and relatives and share me with them. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time, which hopefully will be very soon. Everybody stay safe. Most of all, gain understanding. Peace.